Excited to get into the company as well as your background, as well as kind of topics around entrepreneurship. Maybe where we can start is how does someone like you get into this specific field of healthcare technology? And maybe you can explain the context to my question to the audience.
Yeah, sure. I think everyone's path into their careers is always an interesting one. Um, I grew up in a healthcare family. My father was a general surgeon. My mom was an ER nurse. So I grew up around healthcare my whole life. I assumed I would be a doctor, like my father, but I think he was jaded with the healthcare system, like many doctors, and this was back in the day. And I think he kind of discouraged it in a way. And so I ended up going into engineering, studied bioengineering at Cornell. I did a PhD in biomedical engineering at UCLA. I was working overseas as a postdoc at a research institute in Belgium called IMEC. And I love science, I love technology, but I have not cut out for the lab. And so I ended up switching into a business development role, was leading business development for this company throughout North America, eventually moving back to the US. And in that capacity, one of the big areas that I was covering was in our healthcare business line. And there we were essentially helping other companies accelerate their R&D roadmaps. And the work we did spanned everything from like next gen sequencing through remote patient monitoring technologies. And I got really interested in the work we were doing in remote patient monitoring technologies. There we were developing underlying sensors and technologies to essentially help either shift care from high cost clinical settings to the home through home monitoring. We were doing a lot of stuff even in consumer wearables at the time, and got a chance to see sort of firsthand how the technologies at the forefront of the space were evolving. One of the big projects we did was for a company called Biotelemetry, developing a cardiac monitoring patch for them, which had gone on then to get acquired by Philips for just under $3 billion. And it was like that area that really captured my imagination of just like where the future of health was going. And so my co-founder was one of the program directors at IMEC. I was going out selling deals. He was coming in and helping to kind of execute the development. And we decided to leave and start our own company. And we were looking at areas where there was the convergence of consumer medical markets, where our belief was, and this was back in like 2011, that consumer devices would become medical devices, and that the technologies that we would wear around on our daily lives would start to provide healthcare insights. And we were looking for areas of medicine where there was an untapped need on the clinical side, and where there could be like a thirst for more information from a consumer or patient side. And around that time, I was into a very long, painful fertility journey with my partner to try to start a family. And we spent, 6 years in fertility treatment and had a bunch of miscarriages, and then had a high risk pregnancy with all sorts of complications, and just saw this area of women's health and maternal health as like a huge unaddressed area. And so we decided, hey, wouldn't it be great if we started a company here? And then granted, this was like back in like 2014, and first time entrepreneurs were stupid and didn't realize that there weren't any investors investing in this area. And so, but like, that's where we started, and we're pretty, determined people, I guess, as all entrepreneurs are. And so we really grinded it out for a number of years, trying to kind of like build this business, in the area. So that's essentially how I got into, the starting a company and then the women's health space.
It sounds like on surface, it's a very important problem to solve, and there's so many, soon to be mothers that experience a lot of anxiety because they're not able to understand in real time what's happening in the womb. I imagine it was competitive at the time. I recall there was a company called Nuvo. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you're familiar with them, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there were many companies that were trying to approach this space. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your maybe how you were able to shape your exact product and solution, knowing there were other competitors out there?
Well, the interesting thing is when we started the company, part of what motivated us was, as mentioned, this kind of convergence of consumer medical. And we saw one of the big unlocks of the area is building unique data sets because, women's health has been massively underfunded from a research perspective, maternal health even more so. And so when we initially started the company, we actually developed and launched a consumer product, medical grade technology. It was a little patch that women can put on their belly. And the idea was to help women track and time contractions, right? Something simple. But we saw, hey, a lot of people aren't sure about these things. And so we launched this in the consumer space, direct to moms, not trying to make any healthcare claims. And the goal was to try to address questions, concerns that women had during their pregnancy, and then behind the scenes to start to crowdsource large physiological data sets that we intended to use for biomarker discovery to develop medical grade solutions. And so when we started the company, there was very few women's health companies. There was no dedicated VC funds. General VCs certainly weren't investing in women's health. I can't tell you how many times we got told by investors, like, you need to focus on a larger market. Women's health is not a market. There's not a large enough market. I think that perspective, has changed. I think that we've addressed that. I believe for the most part with folks. But at the time there was very few. And so we were working on that consumer product for about 4 or 5 years. We built this product, we launched it to great fanfare. We won all sorts of awards because it was a really cool, innovative technology. We successfully shipped to about 15,000 women. We built this large data set. We actually did do a first round of biomarker discovery and developed an algorithm to identify labor onset. And then the walls came crashing down upon us because the FDA came knocking and we're like, this product should be regulated. And so this happened around 2019, 2020. And at that point, then we had to really massively pivot the business into what we're doing now. And so to answer your question, when we pivoted the business to focus on enterprise healthcare, at that point, there was more and more companies. Nuvo was out there, Baby Scripts was out there. There's a bunch of companies trying to do various things. And I think as we looked at the market and as we kind of understood where the clinical area of needs were, we really identified high-risk pregnancies is the kind of the right starting point if you're trying to innovate within enterprise obstetric care. And so that is kind of the tack that we took. And so in that capacity, we said, fetal monitoring, which is where we kind of have moved the product, our own proprietary device, which we could talk about, is certainly a critical component of maternal health. But it's in and of itself, it's not enough. You also want to look at all the other underlying conditions that are super prevalent in high-risk pregnancies and how do you improve screening and monitoring of those. And so we added in a hypertension management program, we added a diabetes management program, and then the fetal monitoring component is kind of what makes us unique in the space, is being able to have that component as well as all the other ones. And so we really, I think, how we started thinking about it differently to more directly answer your questions is one, segmenting the market differently. And through there, thinking about what are the holistic set of solutions that an obstetric or an OB/GYN's healthcare providers, what do they need to improve care delivery within that area?
And is it like a kit where you have certain devices and then those plug into kind of a software solution? How do you kind of present the full offering to a healthcare organization?
Yeah, essentially the value prop is that, and the messaging is that, like, healthcare organizations today and OB/GYNs, they are really struggling. The way that they have been delivering maternal care is super antiquated, especially for high-risk pregnancies. So about 1 in 4 pregnancies are high risk. They drive over 70% of payer spend. And a lot of the costs associated with high-risk pregnancies is around birth, right? Adverse birth events. And the only way you improve that is by actually improving management during the prenatal phase. And so, but the way that they're delivering care today is like a lot of in-person appointments, home monitoring with like pen and paper, sending logs back. It's a very cumbersome process for the providers. And so what we offer is a service. These organizations don't want to buy a bunch of blood pressure cuffs, or blood glucose monitors, or fetal monitors, and have to deal with like inventory management. It's a service. And so we sell into healthcare organizations. Doctors prescribe our services to their patients based upon whatever risk factors they have. We will ship to the patient everything they need to monitor from home. So if they have hypertension, we'll send them a cell-enabled blood pressure monitor. If they have diabetes, we'll send them cell-enabled glucometers, test strips, lancets. When they get into the 3rd trimester and they need fetal monitoring, we'll send them a fetal monitor. Everything is ordered directly through the EMR. And then we help facilitate data capture from the patient's home, following whatever the clinical schedule is, transmission to the cloud. We triage that data, and then we drop that back into clinical workflows, including the EMR, such that the care teams can review, triage data, follow up with the patients as needed. And so we really think about it's a service offering rather than like a medical device company per se. And try to like remove all of the friction. We think a lot about friction, remove all the friction for the patients to follow the clinical recommendations for for monitoring, and then remove all the friction for the providers to make sure the patients get monitored and get the information they need when they need it in the right places to be able to proactively follow up with the moms.
And how would you describe the stage you're at currently with the company?
So we've been around for a while, but in all fairness, I think we built two separate companies. I mean, we built a consumer company and had to shut that whole thing down. And then we essentially built an entirely new business focused on enterprise healthcare. Like the masthead is the same, but the businesses are entirely different. And there's a lot of lessons learned there, by the way. So I'd say right now we are early commercial ramp right now. We have partners with healthcare organizations throughout the country. We've validated that this product delivers a lot of value to the patients. It provides a lot of value to the providers. We validated our reimbursement strategy. And right now we're scaling growth, right? So we have a number of very large partnerships that are closing and coming online. We have a strategic channel partner with a company called Paragen, which is acting as a channel into health systems throughout the country. We just closed our recent round of financing to kind of like provide capital for the next couple of years. And so now it's just like scaling up our solution to continue to, prove out the underlying, assumptions under the revenue model and keep growing, right? Keep improving the product.